"You're being uncooperative," the gate agent snapped, loud enough for the entire terminal to hear. Simone Carter stood frozen, her carry-on at her feet, her voice steady as she replied, "I just need my medication with me." Seconds later, airport security surrounded her, escorting her away like a criminal, while passengers watched in silence or pulled out their phones. Simone Carter wasn't late. That's what she kept telling herself as she wheeled her navy blue carry-on through the automatic doors of Hawthorne International Airport. It was barely 12:15, and her flight to San Diego wasn't boarding for another hour and a half. She had more than enough time for a bottle of water, maybe a quick scan of a magazine rack, and at least one moment to herself after a week that had worn her thin. Her daughter's school had called twice with dental updates, her biggest client had moved a presentation to Friday morning, and now she was on this last-minute flight to pitch to a company she didn't even believe in. But that was the job. Simone Carter wasn't one to complain. She was 44, composed, and known for getting things done without making noise. Her friends often said she made chaos look effortless, like she had a built-in calm. That wasn't always true, but she wore it well. The airport smelled like hand sanitizer and overpriced coffee, and the intercom hummed every few minutes with boarding calls and final notices. She passed TSA easily, smiled politely when a guard waved her through, and made her way to gate C-17. A toddler was throwing cereal on the carpet while his mom negotiated with a juice box. A man with wireless headphones paced and cursed into thin air. A gate agent droned on over the PA. It was all standard, rushed, noisy, and indifferent. Simone liked that about airports. They didn't care who you were, only where you were going. She took a seat near the window, tucked her roller bag beneath her feet, and opened the latest book club read, but she didn't get far. The announcement for Group 3 snapped her back. That was her. She stood, smoothed her blazer, and joined the short line forming near the gate agent. Her boarding pass was ready in her hand, her ID zipped neatly back into her purse. No issues. No disruptions. Just how she liked it. Until she reached the front. The agent, a tall, pale man with wisps of blonde hair and a name badge that read Irv Hanley, didn't look at her as he scanned the pass. Then, mid-scan, he paused and gestured at her bag. "Ma'am, that won't fit in the overhead. You'll need to check it." His tone was flat. Not rude, but final. Simone blinked. "I'm sorry," she said politely. "It's a standard carry-on. It's fit on every flight I've taken this year." Hanley still didn't meet her eyes. "Not on this one. I understand, but there's medication in this bag. I need it with me." That made him look up. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You're holding up the line, ma'am." The phrase carried more weight than the words themselves. People shifted behind her. A man sighed loudly. Simone kept her voice even. "I'm not trying to delay anything. I'm simply explaining. You're being uncooperative," Hanley snapped, sharp now, loud enough to make heads turn. That word. It cracked through her calm like a whip. Still, she didn't raise her voice. "Sir, I'm trying to have a conversation. There's no need to escalate this." He waved to a nearby colleague. "Get security." Simone froze. "Wait. Are you serious? You're being combative. Step aside." Her heart was pounding. She looked around, hoping, expecting, someone would speak up. But no one did. One woman a few spots back clutched her purse tighter. Another man angled his phone and started filming. Simone held her hands up slightly, palms open, her voice still measured. "I didn't yell. I didn't swear. I didn't threaten anyone. I'm just trying to keep my bag. Security is on its way. Step aside." She moved to the side, still in view of the line, still fully visible to everyone now trying not to look. Within moments, 2 airport police officers arrived. One asked for her ID. The other barely acknowledged her explanation before saying, "Ma'am, you're being removed for noncompliance." Non-compliance with what? She asked. But they weren't listening. One lightly touched her elbow, guiding her away from the gate. It was quiet chaos, the kind people ignore because it's not loud. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. But the absurdity of it clawed at her. She had followed every rule. She had spoken calmly, respectfully. And now she was being escorted out of a public space like a threat. They led her down a side hallway into a narrow waiting area with plastic blue chairs and fluorescent lighting that buzzed overhead. One officer said someone from management would be along shortly. Then they left. No apology. No explanation. Just absence. She sat, legs crossed tightly, phone clenched in hand. One missed call. Nathaniel. Her husband. She exhaled and called him back. He answered on the first ring. Nate. Her voice cracked slightly. What happened? His tone was low but firm. They kicked me off the flight. A beat of silence. What? Why? My carry-on. They said I was being uncooperative. Where are you now? Some holding area near Gate C. I don't even know. Don't move, he said. I'm already parked. Simone didn't know what she expected next. She just knew she didn't want to feel small anymore. And when Nathaniel Carter walked into that waiting area, he didn't come slowly. He came with purpose. Black suit, briefcase in hand, eyes scanning like a man on a mission. He passed a family eating fast food, a teenager with a skateboard, a woman juggling coffee, and a boarding pass. None of them registered. The only thing he saw was her. Sitting upright. Hands folded tightly. Holding it all together. He crouched beside her. You okay? She nodded once. Not trusting her voice. He didn't press. He stood and turned to the nearby service desk. A young agent in a navy vest looked up. Can I help you? Yes, Nathaniel said, cool and clear. My wife was removed from her flight. I'd like to know why. And I'd like to request the footage from the gate area. The agent blinked. I'm not sure if you can. And I'm formally requesting it now. Please get your supervisor. The young man hesitated, then reached for the phone. Simone finally let out a breath. I didn't yell, Nate. I didn't curse. I just didn't want to check my bag. He didn't need convincing. I know. You don't have to explain. 5 minutes later, 2 supervisors arrived. One had a name tag, C. Langley. The other just had supervisor stitched onto a polo shirt. They wore tight smiles that didn't touch their eyes. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, Langley began. Nathaniel interrupted. Before we begin, I'm requesting all internal video, audio, and communication tied to this incident. And the full names of every staff member involved. Sir, I assure you, the second supervisor started. Nathaniel's voice didn't rise, but it cut through. I'm not here for assurance. I'm here for accountability. The air in the room shifted. Simone sat up straighter. For the first time all day, someone was listening, and not because she'd raised her voice. Because Nathaniel walked in wearing a suit, carrying a briefcase, and demanding the dignity she should never have had to fight for. They weren't even at the gate anymore. But the real boarding had just begun. The boarding of a conversation this airport would not be able to avoid. They weren't even at the gate anymore, but the pressure in the air was thicker than it had been minutes ago when Simone stood alone, accused of being uncooperative for calmly protecting what mattered to her. Now Nathaniel stood beside her, sharp in his navy suit, his voice clear, his presence unmistakable. The airport staff tried to maintain their corporate composure, but it was unraveling by the second. One of the supervisors, Langley, gestured stiffly and said, "If you'd follow me, we can continue this in a more private setting." Nathaniel didn't nod or thank him. He simply turned to Simone and asked quietly, "You ready?" She stood and adjusted the strap of her purse. "I've been ready." They followed Langley and the second man through a quiet corridor, away from the main terminal noise, away from the staring passengers and whispering bystanders. But the silence in the hallway wasn't peace. It was avoidance, the kind that tried to seal up truth behind closed doors and polite titles. The conference room they entered was cold. 6 chairs around a laminate table, no windows, a mounted screen on the far wall. Sterile and impersonal, like every other holding space meant to look neutral but built to suppress. A woman was already seated at the head of the table, a closed folder in front of her and a badge clipped to her blazer. She stood when they entered. "Good afternoon, I'm Danielle Reyes, Director of Passenger Relations for the airport." She extended a hand, but Nathaniel didn't reach for it. "Nathaniel Carter. My wife, Simone. Let's not waste time. We'd like to review the footage from Gate C-17. And we'd like answers." Reyes nodded, her voice smooth and rehearsed. "We've pulled surveillance from multiple angles and have reviewed a portion of it. I think it would be beneficial for us all to watch together." "You've already seen it," Nathaniel said. "You know what it shows. So instead of pressing play, I'd like you to tell us what you saw." She paused, fingers tapping. "Once on the folder. It shows that the gate agent, Mr. Hanley, escalated the situation prematurely." Mrs. Carter remained calm. She was not physically aggressive. She did not raise her voice. She stated clearly that she had medication in her bag. "So why was security called?" Nathaniel's question wasn't loud, but it cut through every ounce of corporate performance in the room. Reyes hesitated. "I don't have a good answer for that." Simone leaned forward now, steady, her eyes locked onto Reyes. "I do. Because I didn't say yes, sir. Because I didn't act scared. Because I didn't fold the moment someone with a badge told me I was a problem." The room went still. Langley shifted in his seat. The second man looked down at his notepad, though it was still blank. Nathaniel opened his briefcase and pulled out a slim folder. "This is a formal request for all internal reports related to the incident, employee statements, intercom logs, security memos, and a copy of the footage. You will treat this as a legal document. Understood?" "Yes," Reyes said softly. But Nathaniel wasn't finished. "I also want the full names and titles of everyone who participated in the decision to remove my wife. And to be clear, I'm not filing a complaint, I'm building a record." "There's a difference." Simone said nothing, because she didn't need to. Nathaniel was doing what she'd done at the gate, speaking with control, with clarity, refusing to flinch, but now they had to listen. Not because the facts had changed, but because the person delivering them looked like authority. And that was the sickness in the system. Simone's voice hadn't mattered until it came wrapped in a man's tone and a legal folder. "Let me ask you something," Nathaniel said, turning to Langley. "When my wife told the gate agent about her medication, why wasn't that noted anywhere in the incident report?" Langley fumbled. I'm not sure that information was relayed." "Because no one asked," Simone said. "Because no one cared." There was silence again. But this time it wasn't just avoidance. It was realization. In a corner of the conference room, another staffer peeked in and whispered something to Reyes. She stood. "We're being asked to meet with head of airport security. They're reviewing the full footage now. Would you be willing to step into the main operations briefing room?" Nathaniel nodded once. "Let's go." The second room was larger but just as gray, with a projection screen already lit. A senior security officer stood at the front with a remote in his hand and an unreadable expression. Around the table sat 3 more officials, legal advisors, internal investigators, faces trying not to show discomfort. But it was there. Because the footage spoke louder than any of them. They played the clip. Simone at the gate, calm, composed. Her hands never left her bag. Her tone never rose. Rick Hanley's face was red from the start. His voice louder, arms gesturing. The moment he snapped, the moment he called her uncooperative, the moment she stepped aside without resistance, every second, time-stamped and clear. "So what about this warranted a police escort?" Nathaniel asked. "Because I've watched it 3 times now, and what I see is a woman following protocol and being punished for it." "The agent acted outside of training," one official muttered. "That much is obvious." "So then say it," Simone said. "I want to hear someone in this room say I wasn't wrong." The room froze. The head of security looked at her, then slowly nodded. "You weren't wrong, Mrs. Carter." The agent was. "Thank you," she said. Not because it erased anything, but because truth, spoken aloud, still meant something. Outside the briefing room, word was spreading. Not in shouts, not in headlines, yet, but in murmurs. Travelers who had seen the incident at Gate C-17 were now talking. Some to each other. Some to staff. Some to their phones. And one of them, a young woman in a denim jacket holding a local press badge, approached with quiet confidence. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "would you be willing to speak with us on record?" Simone looked to Nathaniel. He didn't answer. It wasn't his call. She exhaled. "Yes. But not because I want attention. Because I want people to know what it feels like to be invisible. To be seen as a problem before you're even asked your name." The reporter nodded. "We'll keep it respectful." As they walked back toward the terminal, toward the very gate where it all started, the energy was different. The people who had watched her being walked away were watching again. Some had their phones up again, but not with silence this time, with urgency. With purpose. She stood exactly where she had been accused of being a threat and spoke clearly. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't break a rule. I stood my ground, and I was treated like I didn't belong. So I have to ask, if I looked different, if my voice sounded different, would any of this have happened?" No one answered. But in the pause that followed, you could feel it. Something had shifted. And it wasn't just about Simone anymore. The terminal hadn't changed, but something in the air had. The same rows of vinyl seats, the same boarding announcements echoing overhead, the same travelers dragging suitcases and balancing coffees, but now they looked, not through her, but at her. Simone Carter stood in the very spot where she'd been treated like a threat just hours earlier and told her story not with rage, not with desperation, but with quiet truth. She hadn't yelled, hadn't broken a rule, hadn't even stepped out of line. And yet, she was the one who had been escorted away like a warning to everyone else. Now, she was the one speaking, and they were listening. A few people clapped, but most didn't. Not because they didn't care, but because the weight of her words sat too heavily in their chest to meet with applause. They were thinking. Processing. And that was the start of change. The local reporter packed her notepad and thanked Simone with a genuine nod, promising to be respectful with how the story was told. But Simone didn't need promises. She'd already said what mattered. The truth was hers, and now it was out. As she and Nathaniel walked back toward the main concourse, people stepped aside. Not because they were avoiding her, but because they were making space. Some murmured, others gave small nods, and one woman whispered, "I saw what they did. I'm so sorry." Simone didn't respond with words. She didn't have to. A look of acknowledgement was enough. The flight they had missed had long since departed, and the airport, trying to correct its mistake, offered them a first-class rebooking. Nathaniel declined at first, but Simone stepped in. "We'll take the seats," she said, "but not because it makes this right. Because we're not going to disappear quietly." They boarded that evening, side by side, and this time no one challenged her bag. No one questioned her tone. And when she sat down, she did so with her head high, her shoulders square, and her story intact. What happened next moved faster than anyone expected. The news segment aired that night, just a 2-minute piece on Channel 7, tucked between weather and local sports, but it spread like fire online. The clip of Simone speaking at the terminal hit TikTok within hours. A college senior had captured it from across the room and posted it with the caption, "She didn't yell." She told the truth. By morning, the video had over 200,000 views. Comments flooded in. Some shocked. Some enraged. Many filled with stories of their own. This happened to my mother at O'Hare. My aunt had a nearly identical experience last year at LAX. I work TSA. I've seen this happen more times than I can count. The messages rolled in on Twitter and Facebook threads, through direct messages and forwarded emails. Simone and Nathaniel read them in silence, sitting at their kitchen table with coffee cups cooling beside them. One email came from a woman in Ohio. My daughter was profiled and pulled aside at LaGuardia. We stayed silent. I wish we hadn't. Thank you for speaking. Another from a TSA agent in Denver simply read, "Thank you. Don't let them minimize it. We see it too. All the time." It wasn't just her story anymore. It was a mirror held up to a system that had gotten used to its own reflection and stopped questioning what it showed. 2 weeks later, Simone was invited to speak at the National Forum on Passenger Equity in San Francisco. She almost said no. She wasn't a public speaker. She hadn't gone to law school. She wasn't an activist. She was a marketing consultant, a mom, a woman who just wanted to fly to a meeting and be treated like she belonged. But something in her shifted as she read the invitations, the thanks, the confessions from strangers who had kept their pain private for too long. "They're not asking you to be someone else," Nathaniel told her. "They're asking you to be honest. And you already are." So she went. No speechwriter. No podium presence. Just her, a navy blouse, slacks, and a clip-on. Mic fixed to her collar. The room wasn't massive, maybe 100 people in folding chairs, a camera crew at the back, a few reporters scribbling quietly. But the weight of the moment was massive. When the moderator introduced her, she didn't clear her throat. Didn't shuffle her notes. She just stepped up and started. "When I walked into that airport 2 weeks ago, I didn't expect anything unusual. I had a meeting. I had my boarding pass. I had my suitcase. Everything in order. But what I didn't have," she paused, "was the benefit of the doubt." The room went still. She went on. She told the story exactly as it happened. How the gate agent escalated before she even had a chance to explain. How the officers didn't ask questions. How no one in line said anything. "That's what kept me up that night," she said. Not the embarrassment. Not the headlines. It was the silence. Dozens of people watched me being escorted out for asking a question. And not one of them said, "Why?" There was a murmur. A few people shifted in their chairs. One woman near the front wiped her eyes. Simone didn't stop. "People ask me now, what do I want? An apology? Retraining? A press release?" And the answer is, I want us to stop pretending these moments are isolated. I want us to stop acting like bias only counts when it shouts. Because what happened to me wasn't loud, it was subtle and quiet and polished up with policy. And that makes it easier to excuse. Easier to repeat. She looked around the room. But we don't have to excuse it. And we don't have to repeat it. We can choose to speak. She paused one last time. You don't need a badge to do the right thing. You just need a voice. And the courage to use it. When she finished, there was no instant applause. Just a pause. The kind that settles when people hear something real and don't quite know what to do with it. Then the room stood, not because they were supposed to, but because they wanted to. A quiet, emotional standing ovation. That meant more than any headline. Afterward, a young flight attendant approached her. "I've seen things," she said softly. "And I didn't speak up. But I will now." Simone nodded. Not with pride. With understanding. That evening, she and Nathaniel sat on their back patio, the sun setting across the rooftops. A warm orange glow stretched across the fence line, and the air felt lighter. "I never wanted the attention," she said quietly. I know, Nathaniel replied. But I didn't want to pretend it didn't happen either. You shouldn't, he said. She took a breath. I just don't want to be remembered as the woman who got kicked off a flight. Nathaniel looked at her. You won't. You'll be remembered as the one who said something. She smiled, the first real one in days. And for the first time since it happened, she believed it. In the quiet that followed, a new truth settled in: not every fight has to be loud. Sometimes, the most powerful voice is the one that never needed to shout to be heard. Sometimes injustice doesn't come with flashing lights or loud voices. It creeps in quietly, through assumptions, silence, and policies that seem neutral on paper but feel anything but in real life. The story of Simone Carter is fictional, but the truth behind it is painfully real. Every day, people are judged not by their behavior, but by how they look, how they speak, and how willing they are to remain silent in the face of disrespect. Simone followed every rule. She remained calm. She never raised her voice. And yet, she was still escorted out of an airport like a criminal. Not because she was wrong, but because she had the courage to stand firm. What's more revealing is that the situation only changed when someone with visible power, her husband, arrived. That moment exposes a deep, systemic flaw in how society listens and to whom it grants credibility. The lesson here is twofold. First, it reminds us that dignity and respect should never be conditional, not based on your tone, your clothes, or the color of your skin. Second, it challenges every bystander, every witness, to ask themselves, what would I have done if I'd been standing in that boarding line? Would I have spoken up? Would I have asked why? Or would I have stayed silent, hoping to avoid trouble? Silence, in moments like these, is not neutral. It protects the systems and people who choose to abuse their authority. And that silence comes at a cost to those who are most often overlooked. So my advice is this: if you see someone being treated unfairly, say something. You don't need to be a lawyer, a public speaker, or someone with a platform. You just need to be human. You don't need a badge to do the right thing, you just need the courage to care out loud. To everyone listening and watching our channel, thank you. Thank you for your time, for your attention, and for being part of this growing community that believes in justice, accountability, and human dignity. Here at US Instructive Stories, we share these powerful narratives not just to move you, but to remind you that your voice matters. Your compassion matters. And your silence? That matters too. So let's be better, together. Let's create a world where the Simones of this world don't need backup to be believed. And if this story touched you, please consider sharing it. Speak up when it matters. Stand firm when it's easier to look away. And as always, don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us who we are.